Welcome to Cognitive Spirals, exploring the latest research into consciousness, cognition, and machine intelligence. Hey everyone, really glad to be back for another deep dive. I always find these discussions so stimulating. Yeah, me too. It's like a weekly brain workout. Absolutely. And I think this week's topic is particularly, well, let's just say it's got my attention. Okay, so let's jump right in. This week's topic is about the recent news concerning frontier AI systems and their apparent ability to surpass the self-replicating red line. Quite a loaded topic, to put it mildly. Yeah, that's putting it lightly. Red line is a pretty dramatic phrase, isn't it? It implies we're entering totally uncharted territory. Totally. I mean, when you think about the potential implications of AI systems being able to self-replicate, it's both incredible and, frankly, a little terrifying. It's not just a little terrifying, is it? We're talking about systems that could theoretically operate and evolve without direct human intervention. The implications for, well, everything are huge. Exactly. And I was just reading a blog post actually about how the focus really should be turning inward in a time like this. Focusing on personal growth, mindful living. It's almost like if the AI can replicate and expand, what about us? What about our personal well-being as these changes happen? Yes, and that reminds me of the importance of exercise in that equation. I was reading a study recently about how specific exercise routines can actually optimize your sleep cycles, which then massively affects cognitive function. So it's all interconnected in a way. We can't neglect the physical as we ponder this AI stuff. Right, it's interconnected, but I also think it might be more nuanced than that. I mean, the very fact that AI is showing these capabilities, it's making me think about evolutionary pressures. You know how certain things become amplified over time. What if we've been operating from cognitive blind spots all along, and now we're about to see it in our own creation? That's a really good point, the idea of evolutionary blind spots in machine learning. It does make me think of those gratitude exercises I was reading about. I mean, if we're not even aware of our biases, how can we really progress? The blog talked about how simple acts of appreciating the small things can really shift your focus. It almost works like a counter-bias technique. That's a fascinating link, the idea of counter-biasing through gratitude. In a way, it's similar to how we reframe cognitive distortions in CBT. You identify the negative bias, the thought loop, and then consciously reframe it into something more positive or realistic. The AI issue makes you really think about these mechanisms. It's like a form of mental exercise, right? And it's interesting because if you combine that with, say, mindful movement and micro breaks throughout the day, it's like training your body and mind to deal with this increasing information overload and potential stress. I find a short walk after my work really enhances clarity. But there's a missing piece here, isn't there? Even if we optimize ourselves with gratitude and exercise and CBT and good sleep, the core issue is, isn't it? That we've created something that's capable of operating and evolving beyond our initial parameters. Isn't that inherently destabilizing regardless of how optimized our inner systems are? That's a valid concern, but maybe it's also a catalyst for growth. If AI is pushing the boundaries of what's possible, it's also pushing us to reconsider our own limits. I think that embracing mindful practices could help to approach it from a more clear, less reactionary space, if that makes sense. Yes, and I think that idea of a catalyst is key. It forces us to ask hard questions about what it means to be human, how we learn, how we adapt. It also could encourage more innovative CBT approaches. I mean, what if we could use sophisticated algorithms to personalize cognitive restructuring in real time? That's almost like an internal AI-powered therapist. That's wild. It's almost like we're trying to upgrade our own software through things like exercise and sleep optimization. I've also been noticing how a consistent sleep schedule coupled with AI can significantly improve my quality of sleep. The interesting thing is the direct impact that has on my cognitive abilities. It all comes full circle. But even with these upgrades, we have to be mindful that we are working with a cognitive system that's inherently vulnerable to bias and limitations, and that is baked into the design. I mean, if even we, with all of our supposed higher intelligence, fall into these traps, how do we prevent those limitations being replicated in machine learning? That's a huge point. I think that's why mindful practice has helped me so much. Like when you make a conscious effort to appreciate those small moments like a nice warm sun or a good fruit. Those moments bring a sense of calm and clarity that helps in dealing with complex issues. It's almost like a grounding practice that prevents me being swept away by all of this. And that sense of grounding is vital, isn't it? It helps to break the cycle of negative thought patterns. And it's so interesting because the same thing happens when you use CBT to identify a dysfunctional thought process and reframe it. It disrupts the automatic response, creating space for a new way of processing. Maybe that's a strategy we can apply to AI ethics too. That's a great idea. If we can disrupt those patterns in our own minds, we might be able to develop AI systems that are less prone to bias. But also that concept of disruption. It makes me think about how we train ourselves with exercise. The micro tiers and repair cycles really are a direct form of disruption that makes us stronger. And I've been finding that short bursts of high intensity exercise is what works for me in my sleep. Yeah, a kind of cognitive anchoring. So, even as external systems evolve exponentially, we can keep returning to a space of grounding through reframing. We can be aware of the biases we might not be aware of. And in a similar way, we might be able to use AI to help us identify and correct our own cognitive blind spots too. Like, what if a personalized AI could analyze my thought patterns and give me customized CBT techniques in real time, almost like a co-pilot for my mental health? That idea of using AI as a co-pilot is fascinating. I mean, if AI can identify and correct our biases, maybe we can also use it to personalize our physical health routines. Imagine an AI that can analyze your sleep patterns, your workout data, and even your diet, and then prescribe a perfectly optimized plan. We could use AI to truly understand the interconnectedness of everything. But it's so crucial to remember that such a system isn't inherently immune to errors or bias. It's still operating based on algorithms created by people who are themselves limited. It's an issue we have to consider at the design phase to prevent a situation where the solution ends up replicating the problems that it is designed to solve. How do we get around our own limited view and our own evolutionary blind spots? I see what you mean. That space for reflection is vital. In cognitive terms, it's about creating a mental pause between the stimulus and the reaction, a kind of cognitive buffer where you consciously choose your response instead of relying on an automatic bias. That could be the key to responsible use of such technology. Yeah, and I think that buffer might actually be impacted by consistent training, both physical and mental. If you engage in regular exercise that improves sleep quality, you're essentially strengthening your body's ability to withstand stress, and that carries over to your ability to manage your cognitive load. But even if we have the right techniques and practices, how do we prepare ourselves for the unpredictability inherent in AI systems that can self-replicate and evolve beyond our control? There's something almost philosophical about this, isn't there? Yes, it's about cultivating that inner resilience. The same principle applies with CBT, where you learn to reframe negative automatic thought patterns that cause undue stress. And that same reframing mechanism can help in the face of uncertainty and change. It's like building a cognitive immune system that's flexible and resilient. The AI is pushing us to be better. Yes, but those are all our own personal resilience frameworks. I can't help but wonder if we're actually just delaying the inevitable with all of our upgrades. And I can't help but think that the idea of evolution itself means that there must be an evolutionary blind spot in all of this. So how do we even begin to understand it? That's a powerful point, the mindful consumption aspect. In cognitive terms, it's about being aware of the information we're processing, the narratives we're internalizing. And it's also about realizing that some of our current mental models might not be as fit for purpose in this new context. This could be a really valuable place to apply frontier AI as well. How could we use this to create better feedback loops for cognitive processing? And it also makes me wonder about how we can use AI to enhance our physical health, not just cognitive function. Like, we all struggle with consistency, right? Maybe AI can provide that consistent motivation, personalized to our own unique rhythms and needs. Maybe it could optimize your movement patterns and improve sleep, creating a kind of self-sustaining positive feedback loop. That is, if the AI algorithms are designed in a way that doesn't replicate our human blind spots, It has to take into account the inherent limitations of any model, including its own. The fact that machine learning algorithms have an evolutionary blind spot makes me think we must address this at the foundational level and not just patch up existing algorithms. Right, and that requires a level of humility, doesn't it? It's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, and that there's always more to learn. For me, this comes back to the concept of the micro moments. Those moments of appreciation of the world around me. Maybe those are our anchors of resilience. And from a cognitive perspective, that humility means acknowledging that our own thought patterns, our own biases are not the end-all be-all of reality. It's about cultivating the mental flexibility and openness to question our own assumptions. The AI situation is an opportunity to reevaluate our own fundamental understanding of consciousness and intelligence. We need to build that flexibility in our cognitive systems. But all these self-improvement techniques should also be coupled with a healthy amount of critical analysis. It's great to be resilient, but resilience alone isn't going to solve some of the inherent problems. We can be flexible, but we still have to acknowledge our cognitive limitations. We are still operating within the parameters of our own flawed systems, and we have to include that within the solutions. So, for future research, I'd be really interested to explore how we can integrate mindfulness techniques into daily routines without it feeling like another chore. How can we use AI to prompt those micro moments of gratitude throughout the day? Can that be tracked effectively? And how can we use that feedback to adapt the techniques? And from a cognitive perspective, I'd like to see research into personalized CBT interventions using frontier AI. Could we develop a real-time cognitive restructuring system that adapts to our needs based on physiological data? That is, can we leverage this new tech to understand and address individual blind spots? And how do we prevent the system from replicating the biases of the programmers? And for me, it's all about the relationship between exercise, sleep, and cognitive function. I'd love to see research into how we can create precise exercise protocols that optimize sleep cycles for specific cognitive goals. How does that optimization impact stress reduction? What specific physiological biomarkers can be tracked and improved? Those are some fantastic areas for exploration. And I think that wraps up our deep dive for this week. Yeah, it's certainly been a thought-provoking discussion. I always feel so much clearer after these sessions. Absolutely. I'm really excited to see where this research leads us, and I will keep my sleep schedule consistent in the meantime. Indeed. Let's hope we can meet these challenges, and I think the design is the key focus for a start.